I'm an associate professor of political science and also the founding director of Howard University's Center for Women, Gender, and Global Leadership. I welcome all of you to Howard University, the Mecca, and also to our audience viewing online. We welcome you virtually. I am delighted to give the welcome remarks on behalf of Howard University. I'm standing here also in collaboration with my colleagues with whom we work together to bring this event to Howard. I'd like to mention special recognition to Dr. Krista Johnson, the Director of the Center for African Studies, and Ms. Tania Hope, the Director of the Bunche Center for International Affairs. This is an important conversation on women in trade, a conversation very dear to my heart. And we are looking forward to great deliberations to show how governments working together with civil society organizations, academic institutions, can work towards achieving gender equality and promoting women's empowerment, especially through trade. But pause for a minute. 130 years plus. That's the amount of time it's going to take to close the gender gap. 130 years plus. But this is the good news. Current data show that the continent of Africa leads in the number of women entrepreneurs. Ghana, Botswana, Uganda, South Africa. So there's hope that hopefully we can accelerate the 130 years. But that cannot be achieved if we don't have governments committed, civil society organizations working towards that goal, but most importantly, male allies. And it's my delight to present to you one of the male allies here at Howard University, under whose leadership Howard University is doing our part to promote gender equality. And we hope that other organizations and institutions will learn from our example of getting women into leadership, but most importantly, providing the resources needed for women, because once we have the resources, we can do it. And together, we can minimize the 130-year gap. So I would like to welcome Howard University President, President Wayne Frederick, to give us his remarks. Thank you.
Welcome. First, let me start by thanking Dr. Duani for her leadership and her vision. I want to thank the Center for African Studies campus as well as the Bunche Center, represented here by Ms. Hope, soon to be Dr. Hope, in the very near future. And obviously the Center for Women and Global Leadership. The connection between civil rights and women's rights is clear. And as our nation's preeminent HBCU, we think that we have a distinct responsibility to press for equality and justice for all people throughout the world. For those Howard alum who are here, who received the Howard magazine this past week or two, you notice the cover was about our Howard deans. There's a picture of 9 of the 10 Howard deans, and I'm happy to say that as of probably 2 hours ago, we just added an 11th woman dean. And this is important because 76% of our undergrads here at Howard are women, and I think leadership needs to reflect that. I'm the 17th president of Howard, and we are in the middle of a search, so you can imagine what I hope the 18th president would look like. Women are certainly the backbone of our society. They were the backbone of my household and still are today. When I think of the influence of my 16-year-old who, as a 10-year-old, informed me that she doesn't like working in groups with boys, because they mess everything up and then the girls have to fix it. I think she had a very interesting perspective, one that Dr. Duani always reminds me of. So I think she has an aperture into a world in terms of that needs to have significant change. As Howard University continues to lead the caravan of social justice, there's little we can do that will have a greater impact in championing the cause of women's leadership. And that is for several reasons. Women make several economic decisions, they make healthcare decisions, and more importantly, they participate in our society in a significant way, despite the fact that we still live in a society that underpays women, and especially women of color. And too often in that diaspora, that disproportionality is significant. And that's something that we have to keep an eye on, and something that we have to make sure that we are making tangible changes around. Black women are starting new businesses at faster rates than any other American demographic. And yet women of color still comprise only 3% of mature business owners, and only 2 Black women are running Fortune 500 companies. So there's still significant gaps that we need to close. And African American women actually vote more consistently than any other demographic in the United States, and yet they are underrepresented in state and federal political positions as well. So you can see that there are several reasons why we certainly need to have women in positions of leadership and in positions of making important decisions. For economies to recover post-pandemic, we must focus on ensuring Black women are well represented where decisions are being made. And we need women of all colors in leadership positions to make decisions that will give women the boost they need to level the playing field and catapult our entire global society to new levels of productivity and prosperity. I do want to take a point of personal privilege in welcoming Secretary Raimondo here to campus again. She's been a dear friend and I think a stellar leader, not just of women's rights, but when you look at her economic activity in Rhode Island, and I think what she represents to all of us as a nation, she certainly has been the type of leader that we should all aspire to. And so, as I mentioned, when I think of a world that I want my 16-year-old daughter to live in, where she can have and realize any aspirations that she has, I think it's important. She wants to be an orthopedic surgeon. I'm a cancer surgeon, so I'm very pleased that she's hopefully get a chance one day to visit her in an operating room. More importantly, she wants to operate on elite female athletes only. When I had this conversation with her, what about when the men break their legs? She's like, good luck to them. But the point is that she has aspirations that her mother may not have even been able to hold. We just named the first woman dean of the College of Medicine, a female pediatric surgeon. She's the first board certified African American woman in pediatric surgery in this country. To think of 2022, and I can count on one hand all of the female Black pediatric surgeons in this country. Unfortunately, I can also count all the Black pediatric neurosurgeons, all the Black female neurosurgeons as well. So we have lots to do. We have lots of avenues to open up, and I hope that you would agree with me that Howard University is one of those places that can do that, and that conferences like this, opportunities like this, are opportunities for us to learn more, to become advocates, and to join that caravan for social justice. So thank you again, and I welcome you here to our campus. I hope after this you take an opportunity to wander on campus, because ultimately, what will give you fervor is running into the young people on this campus. You meet 1 or 2 of those students and you'll be converted, as I have been every single day. So thank you and welcome again.
Hello, good afternoon. I am Gina Raimondo, a PhD student here at Howard University at the Department of African Studies, and I have the pleasure of introducing our esteemed speakers this afternoon. So the conversation is, in the interest of time, I will not read their full bios, which can be found on our webpage for this event. You can find it at cfas.howard.edu. So this conversation is organized into 2 panels. The first one will focus on the important work that policymakers and international organizations are doing to advance gender equity and equality, and to promote inclusive economic growth, especially within the context of strengthening US-Africa partnerships. The second panel is a discussion about the private sector, Africa and the Diaspora Women, and the opportunities that exist within the global marketplace. In this discussion, we're very glad to have Ms. Rahama Wright, the founder and CEO of Yaleen Enterprises, Shafidi Morimo, the Chief Operating Officer of Africa 50.
No, she can make it.
Okay, I'm sorry, we won't have that speaker yesterday, unfortunately, as we've been told. But we will have Habiba Ali, CEO of Shea Renewable Energies, and Liz Ogumo, the Vice President for International Development and Global Impact. National Basketball Players Association Foundation, as well as Janice Farrar Samani, President and CEO of Farrar Samani Group. This panel will be moderated by Undersecretary Marisa Lago, who is the Undersecretary for International Trade at the U.S. Department of Commerce. But we will begin with the first panel, where we have the pleasure of hearing from Secretary Gina Raimondo, the Secretary of Commerce for the Biden-Harris administration, Ambassador Katherine Tai, the United States Trade Representative in the Biden-Harris administration, Ms. Pamela Coke-Hamilton, the Executive Director of the International Trade Center, a joint agency for the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, and the World Trade Organization, WTO. This panel will be moderated by Dr. Krista Johnson, Associate Professor and Director of the Center for African Studies here at Howard University. So we look forward to all of these esteemed speakers. We thank you all for coming, and we look forward to the engaging and vibrant discussions that we're going to have this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming today. I have the distinct pleasure of moderating this first panel, and I want to first just echo, I guess, what my Howard colleagues have said about how pleased we are at Howard University to be hosting this important conversation and event. This is the end of our semester, so we don't have as many students as we would like, but we are have been very engaged in the run-up to the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit. There's a lot of programming and initiatives that we do on Howard's campus that the students and faculty are involved in. I want to just highlight, we're actually co-hosting three events surrounding or on the sides of the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit, and we've launched two initiatives that we're really very proud of. The first is our African languages translations initiative, which has translated the Biden-Harris U.S.-Africa strategy or U.S. strategy towards sub-Saharan Africa into 4 African languages. Into 4 African languages, and hope to disseminate that in the interest of democratizing access to information, engaging in intercultural communication and dialogue and debates, both here in the diaspora and then, of course, on the African continent. And then the second initiative that you'd be interested to hear is we have launched a HBCU student Africa correspondence corps. So around town this week, hopefully you'll see some of our HBCU students who will be reporting on the many events that we'll be having this week, and we'll then disseminate that reporting and really do a great job in terms of getting out the word, but also I think developing those networks that are very important for them. Right? So I want to start, so I really appreciate again for you all coming up. Sorry. So here we are on the eve of the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit, and I want to start with you, Secretary Raimondo, and ask, what are the Biden-Harris administration's main priorities for this summit, going into the summit, and what are some of the key priorities for the Department of Commerce?
Yeah, thank you. Well, good afternoon, and thank you for having me. I'll say we in the administration are really very excited for this week. The president is hosting this summit in his first couple of years in office as an expression of his and our administration's priority on Africa. And so I know the president is excited for it. Catherine and I and other members of the cabinet are hosting different events. I'll be hosting a business forum on Wednesday. And so I guess the first area of focus is just a greater prioritization, greater prioritization on the continent, which is large, fast-growing, young, increasingly tech-enabled, and very entrepreneurial. And so our priority at the Commerce Department is to figure out just ways to do more commerce with the continent. And to that end, I have here 11 senior commercial officers, you know, in a wave, but very proud of you guys, I should say. And they're on, you know, doing the work, the yeoman's work, and we're looking to expand from 11 to more. We're gonna have more exposure and work on the continent. We are gonna be sending, I plan to make a visit next year, that my deputy secretary will, Marisa Lago, who's our undersecretary will. You know, our main priority is just more engagement, more commercial engagement. And like I said, really just looking forward to that priority. The last thing I'll say is the level of, and we can talk about this, the level of interest by US private sector in Africa is at an all-time high. And so that's where the Commerce Department really comes in, and what I hope to highlight at this business forum on Wednesday. Our job really is to unlock, you know, that private capital and figure out a way to do even more on the continent.
Excellent. That was going to be actually my follow-up question. If you wanted to just expand a little bit more for us on what is the U.S. Africa Business Forum that you're going to be holding on Wednesday, and what can we anticipate be some of the outcomes of that, and who's attending, et cetera?
Yeah, so we are really excited about this. It is, like I said, I think the main highlight I have, or my main point today, is just to emphasize, although President Biden is very focused on increasing the government-to-government partnership, the level of interest on behalf of U.S. industry, venture capital, critical minerals, supply chain, tech companies is very high. And so on Wednesday, we will have a number of leading U.S. CEOs across industry, climate, agriculture, supply chain, and we really want to increase the partnership, but also I'd like to get those CEOs, business leaders to Africa next year. You know, so the point of Wednesday is begin the discussion, whet their appetite further, which would lead to visits on their behalf next year to do business on the continent.
Excellent, excellent. Ambassador Tai, I'll turn to you now. I wanted to ask first about the national strategy on gender equity and equality released by the U.S. government. How does that strategy seek to empower women of the African diaspora in a complex global economy?
Well, thank you so much for that question, and I'm just delighted to be here to be a part of this particular panel. If you look at the four of us and you think about the Gender Action Plan, it is about unlocking the power and potential of women in America. In terms of the women of the diaspora, I think that there's a great convergence in terms of what we're doing here under the instructions from President Tai and Vice President Harris, and what we see happening on the African continent. If you look at the Aspirations Agenda 2063 from the AFCFTA, and you look at the articulation of goals in eliminating harassment, discrimination, unlocking the potential of women on the African continent, you see almost identical language and certainly identical aspirations here. With respect to the women of the diaspora, I guess I have two thoughts here. One is, I think everyone in this room knows that the sixth region of the African continent is the diaspora. And then speaking of the diaspora, one of the most famous members of the diaspora is Trevor Noah, who just said farewell as the host of The Daily Show last week. And I was just watching his clip while driving over. And there's this one part of his clip where he's expressing his gratitude to his audience. And he says, and I think this is really an important point, even better that it comes from Trevor Noah. He says, if you really want to understand America, talk to Black women. And he explains himself in incredible eloquence. But I think that, this convergence in terms of the women of the diaspora being an engine to help us unlock the best of ourselves and the best on the continent is really one of the greatest opportunities we have right now. And very much want to acknowledge the leadership on the continent and also President Biden and Vice President Harris's leadership in articulating a vision that is clearly shared across our two continents.
Thank you. I'll quickly turn to Ms. Coke-Hamilton, if you will, and ask a question. I have a few questions with regards to AFCFTA. As we all know, this is quite a momentous development for the African continent and really for the global economy. This will create the largest consumer market in the world. And so there's a lot of buzz around it. So it's a game changer in important ways. Ms. Coke-Hamilton, so what can we do to ensure that women in particular are ready to take take advantage of these new market opportunities?
All right, thanks so much, and it's really great to be here. I feel very honored to be sitting with two powerful women in the United States. I think, first of all, let me just say that it is true that AFCFTA is going to be a game changer. It already is in terms of its policies and the way that it's incorporating women already in the protocol on women. But I think there's some fundamentals that we have to get right in order to ensure that we don't simply repeat more free trade agreements. I've negotiated free trade agreements for the last 30 years, and they're nice. They're very pretty on paper. But if they don't translate into real access, then there's really no point. And so what we have to do is, first of all, what is it that women will benefit from in the AFCFTA process? One, we need to make sure that they have access to market intelligence information, real access. How do you know what's out there? We have the Africa Trade Observatory, which we launched about 2 or 3 years ago. And it basically has all the information that private sector would need to be able to know what is happening in these particular markets, what opportunities are there. And so market intelligence is important. We also, through our She Trades program, actually engage women directly on the continent. We're in 50 countries in Africa, basically training and giving women basically boot camps on how to operate. The second thing that's important is actually real market access. And I say this because market access is nice. It sounds great on, I'm sorry, I'm very cynical about agreements that don't go anywhere. So market access is great, but if they cannot meet the standards, and as we know, the standards are changing every day in terms of, the export for their goods and services, etc. So we have to enable them to meet those standards. We also have to enable them to be able to access finance. Access to finance is one of the biggest challenges women face. The third thing we have to do is enable them to do the packaging, the labeling, all the requirements that are needed for them to enter markets. And then we have to look at digitalization. COVID has proven that is the biggest game changer right now for women accessing markets. Why? Because it's anonymous. And a woman can sit behind the computer and you won't know it's a woman-owned business. And so she can have access to things that she would not normally. So it's a democratization of access that a lot of us aren't really looking at. But the digital framework changes the landscape. We found that women who trade in normal circumstances, when they go online, literally double how much access they have. And that says a lot. And then the third thing is access to policymakers. Because at the end of the day, if the regulatory and policy framework does not allow women to actually engage, like many countries in Africa where women can't own land or women are not, they don't have the wherewithal. And so we need to ensure that their voices are heard in the policy-making space and are able to engage actively in that.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to stay on the topic of AFCFTA, Secretary Raimondo, and please ask you to share the value that you see in the AFCFTA that it has for U.S. businesses, and perhaps you can remark on how important digital connectivity is towards enabling inclusive growth in African countries.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for your comments. I mean, that's consistent with our own experience in the Commerce Department, trying to enable smaller businesses to trade. It can be very difficult. I think that AFCFTA is very important for US businesses because it's not just trade as between us and the continent, but within the continent. And now allowing a US business to access an entire integrated economy in a more streamlined fashion provides just great opportunity for any US business. The barriers that sometimes the technical barriers to trade are real. The complexity is a huge barrier, particularly for smaller businesses. So the fact that the AFCFTA makes it an integrated market, by the way, as integrated, one of the fastest growing and biggest in the world, is just a tremendous opportunity for American business. Again, as I said earlier, I feel there's a lot of excitement in the US for what's going on in the continent. And so this just makes it easier to access that. I am mindful, though, of how hard it is for small businesses to do any kind of exporting. True, as you say, for women-owned businesses. But we have an initiative at the Commerce Department focused on helping small businesses, many of whom are women-owned. We've done a partnership with the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses Initiative just to help with access to other markets. Digitization can be a great unlock. I agree with you completely. It can be an unlock for small businesses to do trade. We spend a lot of time providing technical assistance to companies on the ground in Africa and companies here in the United States to just make it easier to get rid of the friction that can often make it difficult. The last thing I'll say is we also bear a burden for educating businesses. Big businesses know. I sit down with big businesses all the time. Cisco knows how to access Africa. They've been doing it for a long time. There's a huge market. Africa is well known for their ICT innovation. Big companies, they know. And AFC, this will just make it easier. It's the smaller companies that, we need to help to even put it on their radar that they ought to be thinking about a trade strategy.
I think that's excellent points. Ambassador Tai, let me bring you into the conversation as well. Women and youth are a primary focus of the African Union's 2063 agenda. Of particular interest to trade policy, the AFCFTA Secretariat is undertaking preparatory work towards the negotiations and development of their women and youth in trade protocol. How is the United States and USTR supporting that work?
Well, we are looking forward to establishing a platform with the AFCFTA, and I think we're in the final stages of inking an MOU with the Secretariat tomorrow. I'm getting my dates Wednesday. Thank you. Wednesday. This week, where we will be mapping out the work that we're doing on a collaborative basis to reinforce the work that the AFCFTA has identified as priorities for the Continental Free Trade Area project that are very much in sync with the work that we are doing here in the United States and that we are looking to maximally support. In terms of women and youth, we've talked about the demographics on the continent. Unlocking the potential of women and the youth does define an incredible amount of opportunity and, frankly, an economic engine that we are looking to create the prosperity for all of us going into these next years and decades. I did want to comment on a lot of the work that we do at USTR is thinking about the architecture of our trade engagements between countries to enable an economic environment for that potential to be realized, whether it's of our human talent, the women and the youth, or unlocking the potential for the entire economy to tap into the opportunities that are created on paper through our agreements. And I want to highlight a investigation that we asked our U.S. International Trade Commission to undertake, looking at the distributional effects of our trade programs over the past many decades. The government has never asked this set of questions before, if we have expanded the pie through our trade practice, who has been accessing that pie? And a couple important conclusions have come out of the report that our US ITC gave us. One was that we need to be collecting better data. And the better data that we have, the better decisions we can make as we collate and we assess that data. But even based on the data that we do have, we see that the displacements that have come from trade have disproportionately hit communities of color. There's also an element in the study that's gotten less play that's also looked at non-college educated white men. I think that for the United States to continue to be a leader in trade and continue to be a strong partner to the rest of the world, we've got to figure out how to do better in terms of restoring a faith that the architecture we're creating is fair and that will create more equitable outcomes. Because as you expand the pie, you also want to be expanding the beneficiaries who can enjoy that expanded prosperity. And that is something that we need to unlock. And we unlock it, I think, only in partnership with others and in partnership with the African continent. I think that is a huge part of our approach to thinking about AGOA, where the opportunity gaps lie, and also how we can expand on our partnership with individual countries, like the Strategic Trade and Investment Partnership that we have launched with Kenya.
Interesting, thank you. Ms. Coke-Hamilton, let me just ask of you, to a large extent, the policies required to support women in trade go beyond a free trade agreement, as you mentioned before. So what do you do, what does ITC do to promote gender equality at the domestic level?
Oh, a lot. First of all, we do have several initiatives. One of the flagships is the She Trades Initiative. And that's a full-fledged platform that, one, allows us to provide technical assistance at every level for women personally, the MSMEs, also with the business support organizations that are women's based. So we have partnership with over 50 women-based associations in Africa, serving over 1 million women. We also work with the African Business Council that also incorporates so many women's-based organizations and so on. One of the other things we do is we tailor our engagement for women specifically, because trade is not gender neutral. You know, people like that it's not. So there are many aspects that affect women differently and affect women uniquely. And so how do we tailor what we want to do to engage? So on top of the women's business associations, we also try to look at the sectors that women are more prevalent. So services, it's been such an underserved area, but it is the fastest growing sector in the last 10 years. And that has been turbocharged by COVID, because what it did is it transferred so much into the digital space that what they thought would take 10 years took 2. And so how do we recalibrate women's access in the context of, say, for example, tourism services, hospitality services, all the services that mostly women are involved in? And then how do we translate that into specific measures? Access to finance. We launched a She Trades Care Invest program with Family Capital and Care. And essentially what we're trying to do is to find mechanisms and do matching grants so that women can access finance. The biggest challenge, as we know, for women is accessing this kind. And sometimes it's just a little bit, you know, but it just needs to be that enough to get them there. So we work with them also on accessing finance. We've also worked, interestingly, the thing about women is when they do something, it's not just for them. And I think most of us, who are mothers or aunties or whatever, you know, we always think globally, we think community. And so we worked on the greening, and we did a agreement with Dorothy McCullough at COG, where we signed on helping businesses to go green. And this is another aspect which is very important, especially for women. We worked with a woman in Zambia. Is it Zambia? Yes, Zambia. And she was able, through her program, to get 6,000 families on solar panels, getting electricity for the first time, leading to 60,000 people in the community from these 9,000 and odd households having access. And because they have access to electricity, they now have access to digital. Because you cannot do digital if you don't have access to electricity. And a lot of people don't think about that, So they're combined. So we try to work at the national levels also, so She Trades hubs. So we have hubs in many other countries. We have them in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Kenya, in Zambia, in South Africa, and we're just spreading them all over. And that has been very useful because what it also does, it prevents what I call helicopter technical assistance, which is, you fly and you drop the thing and you fly out. No, we embed it. And so once it's embedded in the country, then it's owned. And then it replicates and spreads and gives and leaves impact as opposed to just, us feeling good about ourselves. So that's pretty much how we try to work.
Thank you. I want to, we have a hard stop at 3:00, but I do want to see if maybe we can squeeze in 2 questions from the audience, if there are any, or I will continue with mine. But surely we have a couple of questions from the audience. And please be brief. Please state your name and please be brief.
My name is Yawa Hansen Hwao. I'm from Ghana. I really appreciate the remarks that you shared about the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is headquartered in Accra. And I lead a women's network. And I think there's a double-edged kind of reaction to the free trade. But in theory, I think people are excited. But I think people are also scared because a lot of these women's businesses aren't really at the scale where they can even access these markets. You talked about power, which I think is affecting a lot of women who are in the manufacturing space. And I do agree with you that there's a lot of growth in the service sector. But I wonder, what do you think will need to happen? Do we have to have clear quotas in place to protect, just like what we're doing for women's leadership, making sure many governments are adopting quotas in parliaments, for example. Would you be an advocate for that? Because my personal instinct is that this early on in the process, that might be very useful.
Let's just take, if there is one other question, we'll take one other question and then I'll give the panelists an opportunity to respond.
Thank you. Thank you so much. My name is Ashley Lear. I'm the Senior Commercial Liaison for the Department of Commerce, the African Development Bank. And I completely agree with you, Secretary Raimondo. There's so much interest that I'm seeing every day from U.S. companies looking to engage further on the African continent. And I also fully agree that we need to expand our commercial engagement and our commercial specialists across the continent. And I would love to know what Congress is doing in terms of, you mentioned getting more officers out there. Is there a plan to really, in the near future, to expand that presence? And is there the budget to go ahead and move forward with that expansion? Thank you.
I'm sorry, we're only going to be able to take those questions and hopefully we'll be able to answer them. Secretary Raimondo.
I'll go first, and I can be quick, and then the trade experts can answer the other one. We want to expand right away. We have plans to add a few more, and Marisa can help me out here. We have plans to add 3 or 4 more almost next year. And I would say, I've talked to Senator Coons and many others in the Senate in terms of providing more resources. I would reiterate what I said, which is I feel like there's a moment right now. And so more engagement, providing more technical assistance, more people on the ground, I think probably would be supported. But I can assure you that in the short term for next year, there'll be several more spots.
I'll take a quick cut at the second one, or the first question actually, and see what Pamela wants to, what direction she'd like to take it in. When you talk about quotas, when I translate that into trade talk, I think that's a preference. So let me broaden that out. Does it make sense to create preferences for women in the architecture right now? Yes, I think that, I am certainly open to that kind of thinking and engaging on that level. I think that there's also consistently breaking down barriers, that there are barriers to women's participation. I think that needs to still be a focus. And then the third piece, as I was listening to our conversation, I think there's also guarding against new barriers being introduced. And Pamela, you made the point, and I know Secretary Raimondo spends a lot of time thinking about the digital economy and the opportunities that come. But the fact of the matter is the devil is always in the details, and conceptually, the digital economy should be colorblind and gender blind, if it should be. But I think that that's why conversations around data and privacy, around AI and discrimination are so critical, even as we engage now on rules for digital economic engagement, is to try to prevent new barriers from being introduced.
Thanks. I think that's a great question you asked. And yes, I believe that there ought to be a system where what I call a set aside. In our gender lens procurement discussion, the fact is that procurement, for example, is over $1 trillion market. Less than 1% is accessed by women. That is an automatic benefit to women controlled by government that can actually give real and immediate access to women, especially small businesses. So yes, I think that it's something that can be included in the architecture. I think what is important though is to ensure that they're actually able to meet it. Because sometimes we do set asides and then nothing. So I think also very important is, as Ambassador Tai said, is to ensure that they are actually in a position to take advantage of that opportunity. Because it's not just the opportunity, it's also the methodology by which they're able to access it. And a lot of times what happens is we have the space, but nobody fills the space. And I think that is also more important, getting them in a space where they can actually, take advantage. So, hard stuff.
I think we did pretty well. I hope we did pretty well. I want to definitely thank all of our panelists, Secretary Raimondo, Ambassador Tai, Ms. Coke-Hamilton, for really the beginning of really an important conversation and discussion. I appreciate you coming together to have this.
Thank you.
Thank you.